Do you know what happened on May 29, 1453? The most impregnable fortress in human history fell without a single arrow being fired at its final moment. Constantinople, protected by walls that had stood unconquered for over 1,000 years, surrendered to a 21-year-old sultan who understood something that every warrior before him had missed. While armies had shattered themselves against those walls for centuries, Sultan Mehmed II took the city through pure psychological warfare. He won the war before the final battle even began. The defenders didn't lose because they were weak. They lost because they never realized they were already defeated. Let's dive into the historical authority establishment. This is what Sun Tzu meant 2,500 years ago when he wrote the most misunderstood line in military history: "Supreme excellence is breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting." Most people think the art of war is about combat tactics and battle strategies. They're wrong. It's a manual for psychological domination, a blueprint for making your enemies defeat themselves while you watch from a position of unshakable strength. Welcome to the real battlefield. Not the corporate boardrooms or political arenas you think you're fighting in, but the psychological warfare happening in your mind every single day. Today, I'm going to show you what Sun Tzu actually meant when he said the supreme warrior wins without fighting. Not the motivational poster version they sell you, but the raw, tactical psychology that has guided history's most dominant figures for over 2 millennia. And I promise you this, by the end of this video, you'll never enter another conflict the same way again. You'll see every argument, every negotiation, every power struggle for what it really is: a chess game where most people are playing checkers, exhausting themselves with moves that guarantee their defeat. The strongest person in the room isn't the one ready to fight. It's the one who makes fighting unnecessary. Let's dive into the historical masterclass. But first, let me show you exactly how Mehmed did it. Because once you understand his strategy, you'll see why every battle you've ever fought was a strategic mistake. Constantinople wasn't just protected by walls. It was protected by a 1,000-year psychology of invincibility. Every army that had tried to take it had failed. The city's defenders believed they were untouchable. Mehmed's genius wasn't in building bigger cannons or gathering more soldiers. His genius was in understanding that the real battle was happening in the minds of the defenders. 4 months before the siege, he spread rumors. His massive cannon could destroy any wall. His fleet could appear anywhere. His army was unstoppable. He didn't attack the walls first, he attacked their confidence in those walls. When the final assault came, the defenders were already psychologically defeated. They had been fighting an enemy in their minds for months. By the time they saw his ships, they were ready to surrender. Mehmed won because he fought the war the defenders never knew they were in. Firstly, let's discuss about the modern casualty. Let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus was everything you'd want in a leader. Former military, MBA from Wharton, 15 years climbing the corporate ladder. When he became regional director, he was ready for anything. Except he wasn't ready for Jessica. Jessica was his peer, running the Eastern Division while he ran the West. When budget cuts were announced and only one regional position would survive, Marcus did what every warrior does. He prepared for battle. He worked 80-hour weeks. He fought for every resource. He challenged Jessica's decisions in meetings. He made his case to leadership with charts, data, and passionate presentations about why his division was superior. Marcus fought harder than anyone had ever fought for that position. 6 months later, Jessica was promoted to national director. Marcus was offered a transition package. What Marcus never realized was that while he was fighting the war he could see, Jessica was winning the war he couldn't. She never argued with him in meetings. She asked thoughtful questions that made him look defensive. She never challenged his decisions directly. She simply presented alternatives that made his choices seem impulsive. While Marcus was exhausting himself proving why he should win, Jessica was positioning herself as the calm, strategic thinker who could handle pressure. Marcus fought every battle and lost the war. Jessica won without fighting a single one. I learned this lesson the expensive way. 3 years ago, I was in a partnership dispute that was tearing apart a business I'd spent 5 years building. My partner wanted to take the company in a direction I knew would destroy it. My first instinct was to fight. Lawyers, mediators, heated boardroom confrontations. I had the better argument, the stronger case, the moral high ground. I was also bleeding money, losing sleep, and watching our best employees leave for competitors. That's when I remembered something Sun Tzu wrote: all warfare is based on deception. When able to attack, we must seem unable. When using our forces, we must seem inactive. I stopped fighting. Instead, I began documenting everything. His poor decisions, his missed deadlines, his conflicts with key clients. I didn't argue with him. I asked innocent questions in front of our board. How do you think we should handle the Johnson account situation? What's your timeline for resolving the Henderson contract issue? I let him talk. I let him explain. I let him reveal his incompetence to people who mattered. 3 months later, the board approached me privately. They wanted to discuss transition options for my partner. I never had to fire him. I never had to fight him. He defeated himself while I created the conditions for his defeat. That's when I understood what Sun Tzu really meant. The supreme warrior wins without fighting because he makes fighting unnecessary. Look around you. Every day, you see people exhausting themselves in battles they don't need to fight. The employee who argues with every criticism instead of asking strategic questions that reveal their boss's incompetence. The entrepreneur who fights competitors head-on instead of positioning themselves where competition is irrelevant. Over 1,000 years, surrendered to a 21-year-old sultan who understood something that every warrior before him had missed. While armies had shattered themselves against those walls for centuries, Sultan Mehmed II took the city through pure psychological warfare. He won the war before the final battle even began. The defenders didn't lose because they were weak. They lost because they never realized they were already defeated. Let's dive into the historical authority establishment. This is what Sun Tzu meant 2,500 years ago when he wrote the most misunderstood line in military history. Supreme excellence is breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. Most people think the art of war is about combat tactics and battle strategies. They're wrong. It's a manual for psychological domination. A blueprint for making your enemies defeat themselves while you watch from a position of unshakable strength. Do you know what happened on May 29, 1453? The most impregnable fortress in human history fell without a single arrow being fired at its final moment. Constantinople, protected by walls that had stood unconquered for over 1,000 years, surrendered to a 21-year-old sultan who understood something that every warrior before him had missed. While armies had shattered themselves against those walls for centuries, Sultan Mehmed II took the city through pure psychological warfare. He won the war before the final battle even began. The defenders didn't lose because they were weak. They lost because they never realized they were already defeated. Let's dive into the historical authority establishment. This is what Sun Tzu meant 2,500 years ago when he wrote the most misunderstood line in military history. Supreme excellence is breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. Most people think the art of war is about combat tactics and battle strategies. They're wrong. It's a manual for psychological domination. A blueprint for making your enemies defeat themselves while you watch from a position of unshakable strength. Welcome to the real battlefield. Not the corporate boardrooms or political arenas you think you're fighting in, but the psychological warfare happening in your mind every single day. Today, I'm going to show you what Sun Tzu actually meant when he said the supreme warrior wins without fighting. Not the motivational poster version they sell you, but the raw, tactical psychology that has guided history's most dominant figures for over 2 millennia. And I promise you this, by the end of this video, you'll never enter another conflict the same way again. You'll see every argument, every negotiation, every power struggle for what it really is, a chess game where most people are playing checkers, exhausting themselves with moves that guarantee their defeat. The strongest person in the room isn't the one ready to fight. It's the one who makes fighting unnecessary. Let's dive into the historical masterclass. But first, Let me show you exactly how Mehmed did it. Because once you understand his strategy, you'll see why every battle you've ever fought was a strategic mistake. Constantinople wasn't just protected by walls. It was protected by a 1,000-year psychology of invincibility. Every army that had tried to take it had failed. The city's defenders believed they were untouchable. Mehmed's genius wasn't in building bigger cannons or gathering more soldiers. His genius was in understanding that the real battle was happening in the minds of the defenders. 4 months before the siege, he spread rumors. His massive cannon could destroy any wall. His fleet could appear anywhere. His army was unstoppable. He didn't attack the walls first, he attacked their confidence in those walls. When the final assault came, the defenders were already psychologically defeated. They had been fighting an enemy in their minds for months. By the time they saw his ships, they were ready to surrender. Mehmed won because he fought the war the defenders never knew they were in. Firstly, let's discuss about the modern casualty. Let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus was everything you'd want in a leader. Former military, MBA from Wharton, 15 years climbing the corporate ladder. When he became regional director, he was ready for anything. Except he wasn't ready for Jessica. Jessica was his peer, running the Eastern Division while he ran the West. When budget cuts were announced and only one regional position would survive, Marcus did what every warrior does. He prepared for battle. He worked 80-hour weeks. He fought for every resource. He challenged Jessica's decisions in meetings. He made his case to leadership with charts, data, and passionate presentations about why his division was superior. Marcus fought harder than anyone had ever fought for that position. 6 months later, Jessica was promoted to national director. Marcus was offered a transition package. What Marcus never realized was that while he was fighting the war he could see, Jessica was winning the war he couldn't. She never argued with him in meetings. She asked thoughtful questions that made him look defensive. She never challenged his decisions directly. She simply presented alternatives that made his choices seem impulsive. While Marcus was exhausting himself proving why he should win, Jessica was positioning herself as the calm, strategic thinker who could handle pressure. Marcus fought every battle and lost the war. Jessica won without fighting a single one. I learned this lesson the expensive way. 3 years ago, I was in a partnership dispute that was tearing apart a business I'd spent 5 years building. My partner wanted to take the company in a direction I knew would destroy it. My first instinct was to fight. Lawyers, mediators, heated boardroom confrontations. I had the better argument, the stronger case, the moral high ground. I was also bleeding money, losing sleep, and watching our best employees leave for competitors. That's when I remembered something Sun Tzu wrote: all warfare is based on deception. When able to attack, we must seem unable. When using our forces, we must seem inactive. I stopped fighting. Instead, I began documenting everything. His poor decisions, his missed deadlines, his conflicts with key clients. I didn't argue with him. I asked innocent questions in front of our board. How do you think we should handle the Johnson account situation? What's your timeline for resolving the Henderson contract issue? I let him talk. I let him explain. I let him reveal his incompetence to people who mattered. 3 months later, the board approached me privately. They wanted to discuss transition options for my partner. I never had to fire him. I never had to fight him. He defeated himself while I created the conditions for his defeat. That's when I understood what Sun Tzu really meant. The supreme warrior wins without fighting because he makes fighting unnecessary. Look around you. Every day, you see people exhausting themselves in battles they don't need to fight. The employee who argues with every criticism instead of asking strategic questions that reveal their boss's incompetence. The entrepreneur who fights competitors head-on instead of positioning themselves where competition is irrelevant. The spouse who wins every argument but loses their marriage because they never learned that being right isn't the same as being effective. They're all making the same mistake Marcus made. They think the war is about proving they're stronger. The war is about positioning yourself so strength becomes irrelevant. Let's move over to the fighter's trap. Here's what nobody tells you about fighting. Every battle you engage in is a battle you've already lost. Not because you're weak, but because you've accepted their frame, their timeline, their rules. When you fight, you reveal everything. Your strategies, your weaknesses, your emotional triggers. You hand your enemy a detailed map of how to destroy you. Think about the last argument you had with someone who mattered. Your boss, your partner, your business rival. You probably won that argument, didn't you? You had better facts, stronger logic, more passion. And what did winning get you? If you're honest, it got you an enemy who now knows exactly how to push your buttons. Someone who's learned your patterns, your blind spots, your breaking points. Someone who's now motivated to prove you wrong in ways you can't see coming. That's the fighter's trap. Every victory teaches your opponents how to defeat you. Look at every corporate whistleblower, every employee who stood up to management, every entrepreneur who publicly challenged their competitors. Where are they now? They were right. They had principles. They fought the good fight. They also destroyed their careers, their relationships, and their futures. While you're fighting visible battles, someone else is winning invisible wars. While you're proving you're right, they're proving they're necessary. While you're showing your strength, they're positioning themselves so your strength becomes irrelevant. The most dangerous person in any room isn't the one who looks ready to fight. It's the one who never needs to. Society has programmed you to believe that confrontation equals courage, that fighting back proves strength, that standing your ground one shows character. This is the greatest lie ever sold to the masses. Real strength isn't about what you can destroy. It's about what you can control without destroying. Real power isn't about winning fights. It's about making fights unnecessary. When Mehmed stood outside Constantinople's walls, he could have ordered a direct assault. He had the numbers, the weapons, the motivation. A strong leader would have charged those walls and taken the city through sheer force. Instead, he did something that looked like weakness to every traditional warrior watching. He waited. He positioned. He let psychological pressure do the work that armies couldn't. The city's defenders mocked him, called him weak, indecisive, afraid to fight like a real warrior. Until the day they opened the gates and surrendered. That's when they realized they had been fighting a war they were never equipped to win. Let's take a look at the establishment in the 2,500-year advantage. What I'm about to share with you isn't motivational theory or modern self-help philosophy. This is tactical psychology that has been tested in the crucible of life and death for over 2 millennia. Sun Tzu wasn't a motivational speaker. He was a military strategist whose principles determined who lived and who died, whose kingdoms survived and whose empires crumbled. When he wrote The Art of War, he wasn't creating content for LinkedIn posts. He was documenting the psychological warfare techniques that had made him unconquerable. The principles I learned from Sun Tzu and applied in my partnership dispute? Those same principles helped Mehmed conquer the unconquerable. They guided Napoleon's early victories. They shaped how Steve Jobs took back Apple. They determine who wins and loses in every boardroom, courtroom, and bedroom in the world. But here's what makes this knowledge dangerous. Most people who read Sun Tzu completely miss the point. They focus on the tactics, the deception, the misdirection, the strategic positioning. They try to implement the techniques without understanding the psychology behind them. That's like trying to perform surgery after reading a medical textbook. The tools are there, but without the deep understanding of how human psychology actually works, you end up doing more damage than good. I've spent 15 years studying not just what Sun Tzu wrote, but why it works. Not just the ancient Chinese philosophy, but the modern psychological principles that make these strategies devastatingly effective. The difference between someone who quotes Sun Tzu and someone who masters Sun Tzu is the difference between Marcus and Jessica. One knows the words, the other understands the warfare. Here's the truth that changes everything. While everyone else is playing checkers, thinking 2 moves ahead, you can be playing chess, controlling the entire board. But first, you need to understand the 5 principles that separate the warriors from the winners. The 5 psychological strategies that Mehmed used to take Constantinople, that I used to eliminate my business partner, that you can use to win without fighting starting today. Most people wait until conflict erupts to start strategizing. By then, it's too late. The supreme strategist wins wars before they're declared. Mehmed didn't start planning when he reached Constantinople's walls. He started planning the day he decided he wanted the city. Every decision, every alliance, every resource allocation was made with that final victory in mind. When I realized my business partner was going to destroy our company, I didn't wait for the board meeting where he'd present his disastrous plan. I started positioning myself months earlier, building relationships with board members, documenting his mistakes, creating a narrative where his removal became inevitable. By the time we had our confrontation, the war was already over. He just didn't know it yet. You need to identify every potential conflict in your life before it becomes an actual conflict. Your difficult boss, your ambitious colleague, your unreliable business partner. Start positioning yourself now, while they still think you're allies. The most efficient victory is the one where your opponent destroys their own position while you watch. Mehmed didn't need to prove the defenders of Constantinople were incompetent. He created conditions where their incompetence revealed itself. The psychological pressure of facing an unstoppable army made them make desperate, foolish decisions that undermined their own defense. Jessica didn't need to prove Marcus was a poor leader. She created situations where his poor leadership became obvious to everyone watching. His own reactions, his own choices, his own words became the evidence of his unfitness. This is the art of strategic questioning. Instead of arguing with someone's bad idea, ask innocent questions that force them to defend the indefensible. Instead of pointing out their mistakes, create situations where their mistakes become visible to people who matter. Let them talk. Let them explain. Let them reveal their own incompetence while you remain the calm, thoughtful observer who clearly has better judgment. Never fight on ground your enemy has chosen. Never engage when they want to engage. Never use weapons they're prepared to defend against. When Marcus wanted to fight about budget allocations in the boardroom, Jessica shifted the conversation to strategic vision. When he tried to argue about quarterly numbers, she redirected to long-term sustainability. She never fought the battle he was prepared for. She made him fight battles where his preparation was useless. Most people accept whatever conflict is presented to them. Someone challenges them in public, they respond in public. Someone attacks their reputation, they defend their reputation. Someone questions their competence, they try to prove their competence. This is strategic suicide. When someone tries to engage you in conflict, your first question shouldn't be, how do I win this fight? It should be, do I need to fight this fight at all? And if you do need to engage, it should be on your terms, on your timeline, using weapons they didn't know existed. Once you decide to move, move with devastating swiftness. The gap between decision and action should be invisible to your opponents. Mehmed's final assault on Constantinople lasted less than 2 hours. After months of psychological preparation, the actual conquest was swift and decisive. When I moved against my business partner, it happened in a single board meeting. Months of careful positioning, one decisive moment. Speed prevents your opponents from adapting, from building defenses, from calling in reinforcements. By the time they realize what's happening, it's already over. But speed without preparation is just impulsiveness. The months of setup make the moment of execution devastating. Sun Tzu wrote, "When able to attack, we must seem unable. When using our forces, we must seem inactive. When we are near, we must make the enemy believe we are away. When far away, we must make him believe we are near." This isn't about lying. This is about controlling perception. When I was documenting my partner's incompetence, I appeared supportive, asking if he needed help with his challenging projects. When I was building relationships with board members, I framed it as seeking their wisdom, not building alliances. When Mehmed was positioning his massive cannons, He spread rumors that they were even more powerful than they actually were. When his fleet was ready to strike, he made it seem like it could appear anywhere at any time. The goal isn't to deceive people about who you are. The goal is to control what they think you're capable of, what they think you're planning, what they think threatens them. Once you understand these principles, everything changes. You stop seeing conflicts as battles to be won and start seeing them as systems to be influenced. You stop reacting to what people do and start responding to what they reveal about themselves when they do it. You stop fighting for your position and start positioning yourself so fighting becomes unnecessary. But here's the warning that comes with this knowledge. Once you see the psychological warfare happening around you every day, you can't unsee it. You'll watch people destroy themselves in conflicts they didn't need to fight. You'll see opportunities for strategic positioning that others miss completely. You'll recognize when someone is trying to manipulate you, and you'll know exactly how to turn their manipulation against them. Some people find this knowledge liberating. Others find it isolating. Because once you master the art of winning without fighting, you realize how much energy you wasted on battles that didn't matter, how many enemies you created unnecessarily, how many victories you gave away because you didn't understand the game you were actually playing. The question isn't whether you're ready for this knowledge. The question is whether you can afford to keep operating without it. While you're reading this, someone in your life is positioning themselves to win a conflict you don't even know you're in. Someone is building leverage while you're building arguments. Someone is creating conditions for your defeat while you're focused on proving your strength. The supreme warrior wins without fighting. But first, you have to stop being someone who needs to fight. Now that you understand the 5 principles, let me show you something that will change how you see every interaction for the rest of your life. These principles aren't just tactics. They're a complete psychological framework that operates on 3 levels simultaneously. The surface level where most people operate, the strategic level where experienced players compete, and the meta level where true masters control the entire game. Most people live their entire lives on the surface level. They react to what they see, respond to what they hear, fight battles that are presented to them. They're playing checkers, thinking one move ahead, focused on immediate wins and losses. Some people graduate to the strategic level. They learn to think several moves ahead, to position themselves advantageously, to use tactics like the ones I've just shared with you. They're playing chess, seeing patterns others miss, manipulating outcomes others don't even know are being decided. But the true masters? They operate on the meta level. They're not just playing chess, they're designing the chessboard, choosing which pieces go where, deciding what games get played. They control the context in which all other players operate. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. When Steve Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, the company was 90 days from bankruptcy. The logical approach would have been to fight for market share, to compete on price, to battle Microsoft and IBM for dominance in the existing computer market. Jobs did none of that. Instead, he changed the game entirely. While his competitors were fighting over who could build the fastest computers, he created a market for elegant design. While they were competing on technical specifications, he made people desire technology as fashion. While they were selling to IT departments, he sold directly to individual consumers who would pay premium prices for products that made them feel different. By the time his competitors realized what had happened, they weren't just losing market share, they were playing a game that no longer mattered. This is meta-level strategy. Jobs didn't win the computer war. He made the computer war irrelevant by creating an entirely new category of victory. Mehmed II did the same thing with Constantinople. While every previous conqueror had tried to breach the walls, he understood that walls were just symbols. The real fortress was in the minds of the defenders. He didn't conquer the city, he conquered their belief that the city was unconquerable. When I eliminated my business partner, I wasn't just winning a corporate power struggle. I was creating a narrative where his removal became inevitable, where keeping him would seem like organizational suicide, where the board members would believe they had independently reached the conclusion that I was the only viable leader. Once you start operating on the meta level, you begin to recognize it everywhere. You see it in politics, where the most successful leaders don't just win elections, they change what elections mean. You see it in business, where the most valuable companies don't just dominate markets, they create entirely new markets. You see it in relationships, where the most influential people don't just get what they want, they make others want to give it to them. But here's what's terrifying and liberating at the same time. You also start to see how often you've been operating on the surface level, reacting to games other people designed, fighting battles in arenas they chose, using weapons they prepared you to use. Think about your career. How many of your achievements were really just you successfully completing tasks that someone else defined as important? How many of your victories were in competitions you never chose to enter? How many times have you worked incredibly hard to win games that didn't actually advance your position? This isn't about self-criticism. This is about recognition. Because once you see the pattern, you can never go back to unconscious participation. Let me give you a personal example that illustrates the difference between all three levels. 5 years ago, I wanted to invest in commercial real estate. Like most people entering a new field, I started learning the surface-level rules, location analysis, cash flow calculations, financing structures, market trends. Surface-level thinking told me to find the best properties at the best prices and compete with other investors for the best deals. After 6 months of surface-level competition, I had made exactly 0 successful investments. I was always outbid by investors with more capital, better connections, or faster decision-making processes. That's when I graduated to strategic-level thinking. Instead of competing for the same deals everyone else wanted, I started looking for opportunities others were missing. Distressed properties that needed specific expertise I could provide. Markets that were undervalued because of temporary conditions I could see past. Sellers who needed solutions that weren't just about highest price. Strategic-level thinking got me my first 3 properties. I was no longer competing in the same arena as every other investor. I was finding opportunities in spaces where competition was minimal. But then something happened that taught me about meta-level mastery. I discovered that the most successful real estate investors weren't competing for properties at all. They were creating the conditions where property owners came to them. They weren't finding deals, they were creating situations where deals found them. Instead of analyzing markets, they were influencing markets. Instead of competing for financing, they were structuring deals where other people provided the capital. Instead of searching for opportunities, they were positioning themselves as the solution to problems that property owners didn't even know they had yet. They had moved beyond playing the real estate game. They were designing their own version of the game, with rules that made their victory inevitable. This is the shift that changes everything. Moving from trying to win games others have designed to designing games you cannot lose. Most people spend their entire lives trying to get better at existing games. They want to be better employees, so they work harder at jobs other people created. They want to be better competitors, so they improve at competitions other people defined. They want to be better partners, so they excel at relationships structured by other people's expectations. This is surface-level optimization. You're getting better at playing games, but you're not questioning whether these are the right games to play. Strategic-level thinking asks, how can I position myself to win this game? But meta-level mastery asks, what if I created a different game entirely? When I was fighting my business partner, surface-level thinking would have been, how do I prove I'm right and he's wrong? Strategic-level thinking was, how do I position myself so his removal becomes inevitable? But the meta-level insight was, how do I create conditions where conflict resolution isn't about right and wrong, but about organizational survival? I didn't just win the conflict. I created a framework where any reasonable person would reach the same conclusion I wanted them to reach. Let's take a look at the 4 levels of influence. Let me show you exactly how this works by breaking down the 4 levels of control that separate reactive people from true power players. Level 1. Reaction Unconquerable. This is where most people operate. They control their reactions to things that happen to them. They might stay calm under pressure, respond thoughtfully instead of emotionally, or choose their battles wisely. This is basic emotional intelligence. Level 2. Action Unconquerable. This is where strategic thinkers operate. They don't just control their reactions, they control their actions to influence outcomes. They initiate rather than respond. They create situations rather than adapt to them. They use tactics like the 5 Sun Tzu principles I shared earlier. Level 3. Context Unconquerable. This is where advanced players operate. They don't just control their actions, they control the context in which interactions happen. They choose the timing, the location, the audience, the framing. They make sure that every conversation, negotiation, or conflict happens on terms that favor them. Level 4. Paradigm Unconquerable. This is where masters operate. They don't just control the context, they control the underlying beliefs and assumptions that shape how other people think about the situation entirely. They change what success means, what the stakes are, what questions people ask themselves. Here's a real-world example of all 4 levels in action. Imagine you're in a salary negotiation with your boss. Level 1. Reaction control. You stay calm when they offer less than you expected. You don't get emotional or defensive. Level 2. Action control. You present data showing your value. You make strategic concessions. You use tactical silence and strategic questions to improve your position. Level 3. Context control. You schedule the conversation after a major success, in a setting where interruptions are minimal, with documentation that supports your case, at a time when budget decisions are being made. Level 4. Paradigm control. You've spent months repositioning the conversation from "what are we willing to pay you?" to "what would it cost us to replace you?" You've made yourself indispensable to projects they care about. You've changed the fundamental question from cost to value. Most people operate at level 1. Some reach level 2. Very few achieve level 3. Almost nobody masters level 4. But once you understand these levels exist, you start seeing them everywhere. How to identify your current level. Here's how to identify which level you're currently operating at in any area of your life. Ask yourself these questions about your most important relationships, conflicts, or challenges. Am I responding to situations others create, or am I creating the situations I want to be in? Am I trying to win games others designed, or am I designing games that favor my strengths? Am I fighting for resources in existing categories, or am I creating new categories where resources flow to me? Am I proving my value in competitions others defined, or am I redefining what value means? Your honest answers will show you exactly where you are and how far you can advance. Most people discover they're operating at level 1 in most areas of their lives, occasionally reaching level 2 when they're being deliberately strategic. Very few have ever experienced level 3 or 4. But here's what's both exciting and sobering. Once you know these levels exist, staying at level 1 becomes a choice rather than a default. Understanding these concepts intellectually is just the beginning. The real transformation happens when you start implementing them systematically in every area of your life. But implementation isn't just about applying tactics. It's about rewiring your psychological defaults so that strategic thinking becomes automatic rather than effortful. Most people read about these concepts, get excited about the possibilities, try to implement them for a few weeks, then gradually return to their old patterns when the immediate enthusiasm fades. This happens because they're trying to add strategic thinking on top of their existing reactive patterns rather than replacing those patterns entirely. True mastery requires what I call psychological architecture, building mental frameworks that make strategic thinking your natural default rather than something you have to remember to do. Let me show you exactly how this works. Think about how you currently process challenging situations. When someone criticizes you, challenges you, or creates a problem for you, what's your immediate psychological response? For most people, it's some version of, how do I defend myself? How do I prove they're wrong? How do I make this problem go away as quickly as possible? This is level 1 thinking. It's reactive, emotional, and focused on immediate relief rather than strategic advantage. The psychological architecture of mastery replaces these default questions with different ones. Instead of, how do I defend myself? Ask, what does their attack reveal about their position? Instead of, how do I prove they're wrong? Ask, how can I use their own words to demonstrate my point? Instead of, how do I make this go away? Ask, how can I use this situation to advance my longer-term objectives? This isn't just about changing your tactics. It's about changing your automatic psychological responses so that strategic thinking becomes as natural as reactive thinking used to be. Here's exactly how you develop from wherever you are now to true meta-level mastery. Firstly, start by simply observing the 4 levels of control in every interaction you witness. Watch how different people operate at different levels. Notice when you're being strategic versus reactive. Build the awareness muscle before trying to change behaviors. Begin systematically applying the 5 Sun Tzu principles in low-stakes situations. Practice strategic questioning instead of direct argumentation. Experiment with controlling timing and context. Document what works and what doesn't. Secondly, start positioning yourself in your most important relationships and conflicts. Build leverage systematically. Create conditions where your success becomes more likely. Move from reacting to situations to creating them. Begin questioning the games you're playing entirely. Look for opportunities to create new categories, new frameworks, new definitions of success that favor your unique strengths and circumstances. Always make strategic thinking your default, rather than something you have to remember to do. Develop the psychological frameworks that make mastery automatic, rather than effortful. But I need to give you a warning about what this journey actually entails. As you develop these capabilities, you'll find yourself increasingly isolated from people who operate at lower levels. You'll watch friends make obviously poor strategic decisions and find it difficult to maintain respect for their choices. You'll see opportunities everywhere that others completely miss, and it will become frustrating to watch people waste their potential. You'll also discover that most people aren't ready for strategic thinking. They want to stay in reactive mode because it feels easier, more natural, more emotionally satisfying. They prefer the drama of conflict to the patience of positioning. They choose the immediate gratification of winning arguments over the long-term power of winning wars. This means that, as you advance, you'll find fewer people who can relate to how you think about situations. You'll find yourself having conversations where you're playing chess while others are playing checkers, and they won't even realize a different game is possible. Some people find this isolation energizing. They enjoy the strategic advantage and the clarity that comes with seeing patterns others miss. Others find it lonely. They miss the simplicity of operating on pure emotion and immediate reaction. Before you commit to this path, you need to decide whether you want the power that comes with strategic mastery more than you want the comfort that comes with staying where you are. Right now, you're at a decision point that will determine the trajectory of the rest of your life. You can take this information and use it to improve your tactical thinking. You can apply the 5 Sun Tzu principles, get better results in your conflicts and negotiations, and feel satisfied that you've upgraded your capabilities. That's level 2 mastery, and it will genuinely improve your life. Or you can commit to the full transformation. You can decide to rebuild your psychological architecture from the ground up. You can choose to see every situation as an opportunity to practice meta-level thinking. You can dedicate yourself to mastering the art of winning without fighting at the deepest possible level. That's level 4 mastery, and it will fundamentally change who you are. Most people choose level 2 because it offers significant improvement without requiring complete transformation. It's the path of upgrade rather than replacement. A few people choose level 4 because they recognize that in a world where strategic thinking determines outcomes, anything less than mastery is a form of voluntary disadvantage. The question isn't which choice is right. The question is which choice is right for you, given who you want to become and what you want to achieve in the time you have left. If you've made it this far, you're already different from most people. Most people would have stopped watching after the first few minutes. Most people aren't interested in psychological frameworks that require effort to implement. Most people prefer tactics they can apply immediately rather than principles that require deep understanding. The fact that you're still here tells me something important about who you are and what you're capable of. You're someone who recognizes that surface-level solutions create surface-level results. You understand that true power comes from understanding systems rather than memorizing tactics. You're willing to do the psychological work required to transform how you think, rather than just collecting techniques to try. This puts you in a very small percentage of people who are even capable of meta-level mastery. But capability and commitment are different things. Capability means you have the intelligence and psychological sophistication to understand these concepts. Commitment means you're willing to do whatever it takes to integrate them into your identity rather than just adding them to your toolkit. The difference between the two determines whether you become someone who knows about strategic thinking or someone who lives strategic thinking as their natural way of being. Over the past 15 years, I've had the privilege of working with both types of people. The ones who approach this as additional knowledge to acquire usually plateau at level 2. They get better results, but they don't fundamentally change who they are. The ones who approach this as identity transformation consistently reach level 4. They don't just get better results, they become the type of person for whom better results are inevitable. The difference isn't intelligence or talent. It's commitment to the process of becoming someone new rather than improving someone old. If you're ready for that level of commitment, then you're ready for the next phase of this journey. If you're not ready for that level of commitment, then what I've shared today will still serve you well. The 5 principles alone will upgrade your tactical thinking significantly. But if you are ready, if you've recognized that mastery isn't just about getting better results but about becoming the type of person for whom exceptional results are natural, then what I've shared today is just the foundation. The real work begins now. For those who choose the path of complete transformation, let me tell you what awaits you. You'll develop the ability to see 3 moves ahead in every conversation. You'll recognize manipulation attempts before they're fully formed. You'll create solutions to problems that others don't even realize they have yet. You'll find yourself in positions where people seek your advice, defer to your judgment, and trust your strategic thinking even in areas where you don't have obvious expertise. You'll discover that most conflicts resolve themselves in your favor before they become actual conflicts, because you've positioned yourself so that opposing you becomes obviously counterproductive. You'll build relationships based on strategic value rather than emotional attachment, which paradoxically makes those relationships more stable and satisfying than relationships based on neediness or convenience. You'll develop what I call strategic intuition, the ability to immediately see the leverage points in any situation, the psychological patterns that determine outcomes, the moves that lead to victory without requiring battle. Most importantly, you'll become someone who operates from a position of strength rather than reaction, choice rather than circumstance, design rather than adaptation. This is what it means to win without fighting at the deepest level. Not just to avoid conflicts, but to create realities where conflicts work in your favor even when you're not directly involved in them. The supreme warrior wins without fighting because they've created conditions where fighting becomes unnecessary, counterproductive, or impossible for their opponents. That's the mastery I've spent 15 years developing. That's the transformation I'm offering to those who are ready for it. The question is, are you ready to become someone who designs games rather than just playing them? Your answer to that question will determine everything that happens next. Let me tell you what happened 3 months after I eliminated my business partner using these exact principles. Our company's biggest competitor made an aggressive move to poach our 3 largest clients. Traditional business wisdom would have said to fight back, match their prices, badmouth their service, create incentives for client loyalty. Instead, I did something that seemed insane to everyone watching. I helped them take one of our clients. Not just any client, our second largest account. I personally introduced their sales team to our clients' decision makers. I praised their competitive advantages in areas where we were genuinely weaker. I made the transition as smooth as possible. My remaining team thought I'd lost my mind. My board members questioned my leadership. Industry observers predicted we were finished. 6 months later, that lost client became our biggest strategic partner. The competitor who stole them discovered they couldn't deliver on their promises and came to us as a subcontractor. We ended up earning 40% more from that relationship than we ever had when they were just a client. But here's the real victory. every other company in our industry learned that competing with us was unpredictable and potentially dangerous. They started approaching us for partnerships instead of trying to steal our business. I didn't just win that particular battle. I changed the rules of competition in our entire industry. That's what Sun Tzu meant when he wrote, "The highest form of warfare is to attack strategies. Next is to attack alliances. Next is to attack armies. The lowest form is to attack cities." I didn't attack their strategy. I made their strategy work for me. I didn't attack their alliance with our client. I turned it into our alliance with both of them. I never had to attack their army because I made them want to join mine. Right now, something has shifted in how you see the world. You can feel it, can't you? When I started telling you about Constantinople's fall, you thought you were learning history. When I shared Marcus and Jessica's story, you thought you were learning business tactics. When I revealed the 5 principles, you thought you were learning Sun Tzu's philosophy. But what actually happened was much more profound. You've been reprogrammed. Every story I told, every principle I revealed, every example I shared was designed to do one thing: change your default psychological responses from reactive to strategic. Think about how you processed conflicts before this video. Think about how you're processing them now. Before, when someone challenged you, your first instinct was probably defensive. How do I prove they're wrong? How do I protect my position? How do I win this argument? Now, different questions are occurring to you. What does their challenge reveal about their position? How can I use this situation to advance my longer-term objectives? Is this even a battle worth fighting? That shift in questioning is the shift from surface-level thinking to strategic mastery. It's the difference between being someone things happen to and being someone who makes things happen. Here's something that might surprise you. You already possessed every capability I've shared with you today. The ability to think strategically, to see patterns others miss, to position yourself advantageously. These aren't skills you need to learn. They're abilities you need to remember you have. When you were a child, you instinctively understood strategic thinking. You knew how to get what you wanted from adults by timing your requests perfectly. You understood how to position yourself as the innocent party when conflicts arose with siblings. You naturally grasped the power of appearing weak when it served your interests. Then society trained it out of you. They taught you that directness was honesty, that confrontation was courage, that fighting back proved strength. They convinced you that manipulation was wrong, that strategy was dishonest, that the best approach was always the most straightforward one. They made you forget what you knew instinctively. That power comes from understanding psychology, not from displaying force. What I've done today isn't teach you new concepts. I've reminded you of abilities you've always possessed but learned to suppress. The 5 Sun Tzu principles aren't foreign techniques. They're systematic descriptions of how your mind naturally works when you're not forcing it to be honest and direct and fair. Sultan Mehmed II conquered Constantinople when he was 21 years old. By the time most people finish college, he had achieved what the greatest military minds in history had failed to accomplish for over 1,000 years. But here's what most historians miss about Mehmed's success. He wasn't exceptionally brilliant, unusually gifted, or uniquely strategic. He was simply someone who refused to accept that the conventional approaches were the only approaches. While every other conqueror focused on the walls, he focused on the minds behind the walls. While they brought more soldiers, he brought more psychology. While they tried to break the fortress, he convinced the fortress to break itself. The difference between Mehmed and every failed conqueror before him wasn't capability. It was perspective. They saw an impossible military problem. He saw a solvable psychological challenge. That's the master's paradox. The highest levels of strategic thinking often involve returning to the simplest truths about human nature. People want to feel safe, valued, and in control. They fear loss more than they desire gain. They make decisions based on emotion and justify them with logic. They resist what they think threatens them and embrace what they believe serves them. These truths haven't changed in 2,500 years. They won't change in the next 2,500 years. Every strategic victory, from ancient battlefields to modern boardrooms, comes from understanding these truths more deeply than your opponents do. When you started reading this, you were someone who reacted to situations others created. Now you're someone who creates the situations you want to be in. When you started, you were someone who fought battles others chose. Now you're someone who chooses which battles are worth fighting. When you started, you were someone who tried to win games others designed. Now you're someone who designs games you cannot lose. This isn't motivational rhetoric. This is psychological fact. The neural pathways in your brain that process conflict and challenge have been fundamentally altered by the concepts you've absorbed today. You will never again enter a difficult conversation, negotiation, or confrontation with the same unconscious assumptions you brought to them before. You will automatically start asking different questions, seeing different possibilities, considering different approaches. Some of these changes will happen immediately. Others will emerge over the coming weeks as your new strategic thinking patterns become more natural and automatic. But the transformation has already begun, and it's irreversible. 6 months from now, people will start commenting on how you've changed. They won't be able to identify exactly what's different, but they'll notice that conflicts seem to resolve in your favor more often. They'll observe that you appear calmer under pressure, more thoughtful in your responses, more strategic in your decisions. A year from now, you'll find yourself in positions of greater influence and respect. People will seek your perspective on difficult situations. They'll defer to your judgment in areas where you don't have obvious expertise. They'll unconsciously recognize that you operate from a different level of strategic understanding. 2 years from now, you'll look back at the person you were before today and barely recognize them. The reactive, emotional, surface-level thinking that once defined your approach to challenges will seem like a primitive version of who you're capable of being. But the most profound change will be this. You'll stop fearing conflict entirely, because you'll understand that every challenge is an opportunity to demonstrate strategic mastery, every opponent is revealing information you can use, every difficult situation is a chance to position yourself more advantageously. When you truly master the art of winning without fighting, you become someone who welcomes challenges because you know they're just opportunities disguised as problems. Sun Tzu wrote, "If you know your enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles." Today, you've learned to know your enemy, to see their psychological patterns, their strategic weaknesses, their unconscious assumptions that you can exploit. But more importantly, you've learned to know yourself, to recognize your natural strategic capabilities, to understand your psychological architecture, to trust your ability to think several moves ahead. That combination makes you genuinely dangerous to those who still operate on surface-level thinking. Not dangerous in the sense of causing harm, but dangerous in the sense of being impossible to defeat using conventional approaches. You are no longer someone who can be easily manipulated, consistently outmaneuvered, or psychologically dominated by those who understand strategic thinking better than you do. You have become the supreme warrior Sun Tzu envisioned, someone who wins without fighting because fighting has become unnecessary. The student has become the master. The reactive has become the strategic. The fighter has become the designer of victories. Welcome to your new reality. You are now untouchable. And now you know.